Good morning. My name is Richard Schramm, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the North Universalist Chapel Society of Woodstock, Vermont on this Sunday, May 9th, 2021. I'd like to begin with congratulations and appreciation for the Change the World Kids Soup Project, which wrapped up last week after operating for almost 5 months. With the support of the Ottaquiche Health Center, Billings Farm, and the North Chapel, the inspiration and culinary skills of Chef Ken Woodhead, the leadership of Michael Zoldis and Karen Gainey, the many dedicated volunteers like Ann Dean, and the energy and help of the Change the World Kids, the project made and distributed over 1,500 quarts of soup to those in need throughout the Upper Valley. This was a remarkable contribution during very hard times, for which we are all indebted. Our theme this month is caring for the earth. It's also Mother's Day today, so let's be sure and celebrate and appreciate Mother Nature along with all our other moms. Like so many tuning in today, I appreciate being in and listening to nature. The special importance of this was brought home to me 15 years ago when Daniel Jantos encouraged my late wife, Nancy Nye, during her last months with us, to take some time to sit outside in nature and just listen and see what she heard and felt. These were special times for her, times that brought her considerable solace and perhaps a deeper understanding of how we are all part of and connected to the natural world. Being in and listening to nature is a theme in many poems. Wendell Berry writes, "When despair for the world grows in me and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things." Chief Dan George celebrates how nature speaks to us. "The beauty of the trees, the softness of the air, the fragrance of the grass speaks to me. The summit of the mountain, the thunder of the sky, the rhyme of the sea speaks to me. The faintness of the stars, the freshness of morning, the dewdrops on the flowers speaks to me. The strength of fire, the taste of salmon, the trail of the sun, they speak to me, and my heart soars." And finally, this wonderful old Native American elder story, rendered into modern English by David Wagner, "Lost. Stand still. The trees ahead and the bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat it as a powerful stranger, must ask permission to know it and be known. The forest breeze, listen. It answers, I have made this place around you. If you leave it, you may come back again, saying, here. No two trees are the same to raven. No two branches are the same to wren. If what a tree or a bush does is lost on you, you are surely lost. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you." Reverend Leon Dunkley's reflection today is entitled "Daffodils and Motherhood, a springtime reflection on charity, mercy, and patience." We begin the service with the hymn, "For the Earth Forever Turning."
Hello, my name is Laura Foley. I'm speaking to you today from the woods of Pomfret, Vermont, a misty day. Mother's Day made me think about my own experience of motherhood, and I wanted to share this poem, which goes back to when my children were little. It's called Driving Route 95. We drive south 21 hours straight to our ramshackle third home we rent out for tax money, keeping an attic room for the two of us, then 3, then 4, then 5 as our family expands. And one year, thanks to our pregnant lab, we return north with 11 new pups. But this story isn't about the dogs, house, or bike rides to the beach, manatees, dolphins, or flying fish lifting from the Azure Bay. It's about the long drive south, one year when our children are little. 2 sons sleeping as Stefan drives, me nursing the baby in the back, drowsy, middle of the night. When he stops for gas, goes inside, I wake, place the baby in her car seat, crawl over her, 2 sleeping sons, dogs, to the restroom, emerging 5 minutes later to the anonymous service station, almost empty, a cool, dark Carolina night, where I see no van, no kids, no dogs, no baby, no husband. I'm alone on a moonless night, far from home in the sleeping south. My body, breasts, and throat fill with an ache I've never known, that years later will become habitual. But now, on this soft November night, I'm a young mother whose whole family is speeding away from me, unaware. I commandeer an elderly couple to speed me along the interstate till we see my van ahead packed with life, my life, for which we honk and wave.
Good morning and good Sunday. I hope that this new day finds you well. My name is Leon Dunkley and I miss you all so terribly. I am honored to serve here as minister at North Universalist Chapel Society, or North Chapel in Woodstock, Vermont. Today is Sunday, May the 9th, and the title of this morning's reflection is Daffodils, and you can see them. You see them right here behind me. The title of this morning's reflection is Daffodils and Motherhood, a springtime reflection on charity, mercy, and patience. Happy Mother's Day, everyone. It is good to be together. Daffodils are blossoming all around us. They are symbols of rebirth. They are perfect for early spring, perfect for Mother's Day, perfect for a Mother's Day memory. I came across an old picture from 1986. It was from a time when I was in college. I was in my junior year. I was in an all-male a cappella singing group called the Beelzebubs. The picture was from our Mother's Day concert, and four of our mothers were in attendance. My mother was there. We invited our mothers up onto the stage, and we set out chairs for them, and we sang to them. We sang an old Four Freshmen's tune called After You, and we laid it on pretty thick. After you, there is no one for me. After you, there's no one I can see. Tell me, how many angels can there be if they were more like you? What a great world this would be. And we swooned around them, and we carried on, and we tried to make everyone laugh. Here's what it looked like back in the day. We had a chance to celebrate our mothers and a chance to create a loving memory. It was funny, it was a little embarrassing, but we made the gift to last, and it has lasted now for 35 years. My happy Mother's Day to everyone, and by everyone I do mean everyone, not just to the moms, but to each and every single one of us, although I do mean mothers the most. I say that as a kind of caveat, as a means of keeping myself safe. I don't want to get in trouble with my own mom. She's in her 80s now, but she's tough as nails, and I don't want to mess with her. I love my mom. I feel like we are closer now than ever. We are more real with one another, and that took some work. It took some time and a lot of courage. I'm the youngest child in my family. There were four of us in the immediate circle, me and my cousin Pam and my cousin Donna and my sister Lisa. As the youngest and as the only boy, I was the center of attention for a little while, and I was into that. My family would pore over me. My cousins and my sister would pore over me. I was in seventh heaven on holidays, and on occasions when the family got together, I was just blissed out until the moment ended, and Pam and Donna and Lisa rushed off to spend time with one another. I was on my own because I wasn't a girl. And I was okay with that. I had a vivid imagination. I was precocious and not the slightest bit shy, so I found other things to do. I wasn't lonely. And plus, they were into doing things I didn't like, boring things like talking with one another. They didn't like the cool things like baseball games and G.I. Joe games and games with trucks and games with tanks and playing games in the dirt. For many years, I doubted whether and how they could possibly become well-rounded people without being able to enjoy these things, but they did just fine. I love them so much. My family has taught me a lot about Mother's Day. My extended family has taught me a lot about Mother's Day too. My great-grandmother was an indigenous woman in the Caribbean. She was Arawak, with the fiercest and most beautiful face I'd ever seen. I was almost afraid of her. She was so beautiful, and I had no reason to be. She had dark skin and angled nose and deep wrinkles. She looked absolutely magical to me. I never really knew her. I only met her once, and I was only 4 years old when I did, but she's still dreamy and wild and wise in my vivid imagination and memory. My great-grandmother was Arawak, an indigenous woman from Jamaica. I wonder what she would have thought of Mother's Day. Officially speaking, Mother's Day is now 107 years old. Mother's Day is younger than my great-grandmother in Jamaica. Still, for more than a century, we have been celebrating Mother's Day. Woodrow Wilson proclaimed this clearly in Washington in 1914. He said, "Whereas, by joint resolution, the President is authorized and requested to issue a proclamation. Now, therefore, I, Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States, by virtue of the authority vested in me, do hereby direct government officials to display the United States flag on government buildings and do invite the people of the United States to display the flag at their homes or other suitable places as a public expression of our love and reverence for the mothers of our country. In witness whereof I have set my hand and caused the seal of the United States to be hereunto affixed." The document was signed, bam, sealed, stamped, and all official and everything. Mother's Day was newly underway. According to Unitarian church records, however, the history of Mother's Day predates Woodrow Wilson's proclamation. The history of Mother's Day actually dates back to the 1870s, back to Boston, and back to a Unitarian woman named Julia Ward Howe. This is a famous name. Julia Ward Howe is the author of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and we know her words. "Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He has trampled out the vintage where the grapes of wrath were stored. He has loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah." We know these words. They are famous to us. They've been quoted by many people. They come to us from many sources. Perhaps the most famous and most dramatic of these quotations was that of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King in 1968. He quoted Julia Ward Howe prophetically at the end of his mountaintop address. He said, "I just want to do God's will. And he has allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I have looked over, and I have seen the promised land. And I may not get there with you. But I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land. And so I am happy tonight. I am not worried about anything. I am not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord." Martin Luther King adored his mother. She was so proud of him, an exemplar of the church that she had given her life energy to. Martin Luther King's own mother was beautiful and powerful, a central figure of that church. What was Mother's Day like when Alberta Christine Williams King was the center of attention? And what was it like when Coretta Scott King, Martin Luther King's wife, was the center of attention? What was it like to be in their shoes? I don't know what it was like to be in their shoes. I never did that, but I was in their house. That was as close as I got. The Unitarian Universalist Association sponsored a tour, something they called the Living Legacy Tour. And we flew down to Alabama, and we got on a bus, and we toured all of these sites in Alabama and Mississippi, famous sites along the Freedom Road of the Civil Rights Movement. We went to Brown Chapel in Selma, Alabama. We walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, as John Lewis had done. We went to the Dexter Avenue Church in Montgomery, where Martin Luther King served as pastor, and we went to his home, where his family lived. I stood in his living room. I sat on their couch. I looked out of their window, and I leaned against the counter by the sink in the kitchen. It was all quite strange and normal. It's like a fantasy in my memory now, a fantasy that brings history to life. Because they were average people. They were people just like you and just like me. But they were driven by a fire. They were on a mission. They had the highest goals of humanity in mind. They aspired, fire-driven, not for monetary gain and not for material acquisition. I wish you could have seen the living room. I wish you could have seen their home. It was humble. It was modest, unassuming. They aspired, fire-driven, to the highest goals of faith and freedom. What was Mother's Day like for them, for ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances? I wonder, as I wander farther back down Freedom's Road, beyond the civil rights movement and back to the time of the Civil War, I wonder what Mother's Day was like for Julia Ward Howe. Her eyes had seen the glory of the coming of the Lord, but I doubt that she foresaw the coming of Mother's Day, at least not how it currently exists. In the 1870s, she had made a very different plea. She made no appeal to war or to nationalism. She appealed to peace and to womanhood. She was critical of war. She said, "Again, in the sight of the Christian world, have the skill and power of two great nations exhausted themselves in violence. Again, have the sacred questions of international injustice been defiled. In this day of progress, in this century of light, the ambition of rulers has been allowed to barter the dear interests of domestic life for the bloody exchanges of the battlefield. Thus men have done. Thus men will do." These words, these anti-war words, were the radical beginnings of Mother's Day. They had nothing to do with men and nations. They had nothing to do with flags and fighting. Julia Ward Howe's appeal to the Christian mothers of the world was a gesture of peace. "Arise," she said. "Arise then, Christian women of this day. Arise, all women who have hearts, whether your baptism be that of water or of tears. Say firmly, our sons will not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity and mercy and patience." Charity, mercy, and patience, these were the true elements of womanhood, the true elements of motherhood. And Julia Ward Howe cherished them. These were the true elements of womanhood and of motherhood, whether or not one's own body had ever borne a child. There are many ways of bringing life into this world. Julia Ward Howe's appeal to women was a gesture of nonviolence, and I'm not surprised that Martin Luther King was influenced by her. To the women of the world, she commanded, "Let there be found a means whereby the great human family can live in peace, man as brother of man, each bearing after his own kind the impress not of Caesar, but of God." Beautiful writing. You know, some of us believe that certain aspects of human history don't belong to us and that other aspects do. Sometimes some of us believe that we can outsource particular parts of our past. I believe this sometimes, and I get trapped in my own beliefs. Maybe you do too, beliefs that lead me to think that I can pick and choose when really it is the wholeness of a thing that is most deeply meaningful. It is the wholeness that allows us to heal what has been broken. Now, I used to work at the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee when I lived in Boston, and there was a poster on the wall in one of the offices back then, a poster with a complex 9-word question that was broken into 5 simpler, less meaningful parts. And the parts were progressive. They built on each other. They grew in their complexity until the whole thing was achieved. The first line said, "What?" The second line said, "What makes you?" And the third says, "What makes you think?" And the fourth, "What makes you think you can?" And the fifth, "What makes you think you can change?" And the final one, "What makes you think that you can change the world?" You can't really say that the complex whole is greater than the sum of its simpler parts, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. If we choose to be charitable with ourselves, if we choose to be merciful with one another, if we are patient, it becomes possible to see ourselves in one another. No matter how unimaginable the prospect may seem at first, opposite things can be reconciled. We just have to have faith enough in the journey. Joni Mitchell writes, I'm traveling in some vehicle, and I'm sitting in some cafe, a defector from the petty wars that shell-shock love away. She says, in our possessive coupling, so much could not be expressed. So now I am returning to myself these things that you and I suppressed. I see something of myself in everyone, just at this moment in the world. I see something of myself in everyone. On a whim, I wondered how Mother's Day was recognized in the Buddhist tradition, and I came quickly across an article in Tricycle magazine, a Buddhist review. It was an interesting article, it's a good magazine. The article was called quite simply Celebrating Mother's Day. It was published last year in May of 2020, and the author writes, During this time of pandemic, loving, attentive care is in high demand. Many of us find ourselves reflecting on the people who have taken care of us in the past or continue to offer loving presence in our lives. Whether they are our mothers or grandmothers or aunts or caregivers, there is a Tibetan Buddhist teaching that describes how all beings have been our mothers at some point in the cycle of rebirth. This Mother's Day, we practiced seeing everyone we encounter as our mother. Now, there's a practice for us. Let's try it and see how things turn out. No, here's a painful story, but a triumphant one. But Joni Mitchell is a mother. She is a mother who chose not to raise her own child. In 1971, she shared what she could of that story in song. She wrote, Born with a moon in Cancer. Choose her a name she will answer to, call her Green. And the winters cannot fade her, call her Green, for the children who have made her, little Green, be a gypsy dancer. She wrote, a child with a child pretending, speaking of herself. Weary of lies, you are sending home. So you sign all the papers in the family name, and you're sad, and you're sorry, but you're not ashamed. Oh, little Green, have a happy ending. There'll be icicles and birthday clothes, and sometimes there'll be sorrow. And there was sorrow for a while, but then things changed. The sun came out again somehow. After many, many years apart, mother and daughter found each other again. They found each other and they built a deep relationship. This doesn't always happen. In fact, it doesn't often happen. But they are quite close with one another now. I had the great fortune to see her in Vancouver, Herbie Hancock says. He said, I had the great fortune to see her in Vancouver, Joni Mitchell in Vancouver, when she was first with her daughter for the very first time. She was so overjoyed, she was like a little kid. Joni's face had changed. And Joni Mitchell elaborated, we were both very excited about meeting. I'm thinking to myself, what if she doesn't like me? She probably won't. You know, there are going to be issues here. She arrived and I was upstairs, I was painting. So I walked out to the balcony of the house and I saw her in the dark. It was like Romeo and Juliet. And Key Lauren Gibb, Joni Mitchell's daughter, continued saying she had paintbrushes in her hands when we met. We met at the front door in the kitchen with hugs, and it felt like I had gone away for a trip for a couple of months. And I was coming home. So much is possible with charity, mercy, and with patience. Motherhood and womanhood can mean so very many different things. We've been through so much over the past 15 months. The contested presidential election, the insurrection at the Capitol, the Derek Chauvin case, police violence in major cities, the mounting tension between intellectual property and private patents in the context of a public health crisis and a global pandemic that is conditioning its second Mother's Day. It's a good time to reflect on Julia Ward Howe and bring new life to her appeal to womanhood. Bring new meaning to the values of charity, mercy, and patience. Bring new depth to the Hallmark cards that read, I know what love is because of you. Happy Mother's Day. As we are now in the season of spring, and as the daffodils are fully in their glory, may they rebirth in us the deep and powerful meaning of Mother's Day. May the daffodils gently remind us that there are many ways of bringing new life into this world. Happy Mother's Day. May it be so. Blessed be. And amen.